realms of connection. Our focus is on the profound architecture of silence, the necessary space between components, and how it enables deep resonance. This emerging understanding reveals a reality defined by profound, entangled unity, which fundamentally shifts how we approach complex systems.
When we think of gravity, we often focus on the felt experience, the unconditional love of grounding that simply holds us to the earth. But this creates a conflict with our textbook definitions. Is weight truly the force of gravity, or is it simply what the scale reads? The new paradigm resolves this by validating your real-world experience as an active reality, shifting the underlying mechanism from an invisible pull to the actual geometry of space-time.
Isaac Newton introduced the concept of gravity, but famously declaring hypotheses non fingo, refused to speculate on its underlying mechanism. This intellectual silence lasted 2 centuries, fundamentally reshaping our worldview into a deterministic, clockwork universe. The resulting model relegated God to merely fixing irregularities, creating a deep, hostile separation between humanity and the vast, silent cosmos. The relativistic shift tells us that matter and space-time are inextricably linked. Matter curves the fabric, and the fabric determines motion. This means gravity is geometry, not simply a force. This profound realization carries deep theological resonance. If space and time are physically linked, the traditional boundary between the creator and the structure blurs. The divine is not merely fixing a broken clock, but actively sustaining the dynamic fabric of existence itself. Quantum mechanics fundamentally shows that reality is not solid stuff, but pure potentiality. This discovery demands we add active information to our basic vocabulary alongside matter and energy. Carl Jung and Wolfgang Pauli connected this, suggesting that the mental and physical emerge from a single background reality, the unus mundus. We can thus think of gravity as the physical side of reality, with meaning acting as the equally crucial underlying informational side of that very same coin. We propose that gravity is not a mechanical tether, but the architecture of connection itself, a manifestation of emergent unity. This new paradigm suggests space-time isn't fundamental, but instead arises from the entanglement of quantum information. Entropic gravity shows that objects fall toward each other because at the deepest quantum level, they are already fundamentally connected, as the entire universe fights to return to unity. The crisis in physics is clear. General relativity breaks down completely at the singularity, where the math simply goes silent. This failure necessitates a fundamental paradigm shift, moving us from the view of a static, dead universe to a dynamic, computational one, where gravity is essentially the processing of information. To move forward, we must adopt intellectual humility, a return to hypotheses non fingo, focusing on describing how emergent spacetime works without claiming to fully grasp the ultimate why. We must reject the distant clockwork god of deism. Our focus is on the active sustainer and creatio continuans. Gravity itself is evidence of this active, ongoing unification, demonstrating that the universe requires constant input. As Polkinghorne argued, God interacts with the open grain of nature through active information. God is truly the essential environment in which all reality continually emerges. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin offered a powerful synthesis. Love acts as metaphysical gravity, driving the universe toward complexity and consciousness, what he termed the omega point, while gravity governs matter, pulling the physical universe toward unity. Love acts as the parallel radial energy, pulling the conscious universe toward oneness. This perspective reframes love, not merely as an emotion, but as the essential, attractive force unifying all life. We are exploring Eastern resonance by connecting karma to gravity, a universal, impersonal law of cause and effect that weighs our actions without judgment.
prana is the intelligent, vital life force from which physical forces truly evolve, not the other way around. Concepts like dharma and adharma further formalize this equilibrium as principles of motion and rest. Whether we call it entanglement, love, or karma, the ancient paradigm points toward a fundamental cosmic balance. The biggest societal impact of the old mechanical worldview is alienation, leaving us as isolated observers in what feels like a dead universe. But the entangled worldview offers a powerful solution, a sociology of resonance. As the imagery illustrates, once we understand we are fundamentally connected, that alienation is simply an illusion. Our goal is no longer to control the world, but to truly vibrate with it, moving toward genuine reciprocal engagement and connection. The challenge of worship in orbit is that Earth-centric rituals break down when the sun rises 16 times a day and Mecca constantly moves relative to the observer. As we become spacefaring, the adaptation is clear. We must decouple faith entirely from geography. The deeper lesson here is shifting from a geometry of place to a geometry of intent. When physical gravity weakens, this metaphysical gravity, our collective faith and unity, becomes the essential primary anchor for humanity in the cosmos. Let's summarize how this new worldview bridges the gap between different spheres. For the public, stability remains key, where we view gravity as an active, unconditional love tethering us to the Earth. Scientifically, we pivot to emergence, recognizing space-time as fundamentally emerging from quantum entanglement, accepting limits on the ultimate why. This also empowers religion by rejecting passive deism, seeing God as the dynamic sustainer and omega point. We conclude with the concept of the omega point, falling upward. Gravity isn't just a physical force, it's the profound promise that we are not meant to remain isolated. Our trajectory is not a collapse into a void, but rather a convergence. We are consistently falling together into greater complexity, consciousness, and unity. As Teilhard de Chardin suggested, love is metaphysical gravity, guiding us towards this ultimate. Officially unsealing the Gravity Inquisition case file, detailing the systematic suppression of key planetary gravity data stretching back to 1687. That architecture of silence has led us to a critical inflection point today. The orbital interference report confirms we have reached the saturation limit. The Kessler syndrome zone is active, and the official space debris count is drastically understated, signaling imminent orbital collapse. Our architecture of silence began in 1687, when Newton restricted inquiry by banning the fundamental question of why, creating a fertile ground for settled science rhetoric seen later in the Scopes trial. By 2022, regulations institutionalized this ignorance, treating gravity as an infinite background rather than a finite resource. This leads directly to our current crisis, the imminent Kessler syndrome, where managing effects but ignoring causes threatens the irreversible loss of the entire space domain. Let's pull back the curtain on Newton's famous public stance, "I frame no hypotheses." Though he publicly refused to speculate on gravity's cause, his private correspondence reveals a critical concern. He confessed the idea of action at a distance was a great absurdity without a physical mediator. This strategic silence, this private confession versus public omission, effectively stifled scientific investigation into gravity's fundamental mechanism for the next 200 years, fundamentally reshaping experimental philosophy. Between Newton and Einstein, asking what causes gravity defined the sterile centuries. Newton's action at a distance was the established dogma, but mechanical theories, like Lesage's idea of tiny particles pushing planets, were treated as outright heresy. These crucial inquiries were often excluded from journals, not because of technical flaws, but because they violated the prevailing Newtonian paradigm, keeping the gravitational field static for 2 centuries. Our concept of social gravity relies heavily on the discipline of silence. Examining historic codes of conduct, we see that gravity mandates modesty and politeness, leading directly to institutional seriousness. The key takeaway is that professional gravity is maintained through restraint in speech. To be considered grave was historically synonymous with being silent, and speculating on undocumented causes meant risking one's professional standing entirely.
Gravity is the ultimate rhetorical benchmark for settled science, often invoked in debates, like the Scopes trial, as a weapon to silence controversy in other fields. When we claim something is as certain as gravity, we completely erase its complex history of debate, anomalies, and revisions. This monolithic certainty prevents us from acknowledging that real uncertainties still exist, even within the fundamentals of physics, effectively prohibiting honest public discussion about the field.
We face a clear theoretical divide between the smooth, deterministic universe of general relativity and the discrete, uncertain reality of quantum mechanics. The modern dogma, the quantum prohibition, dictates that gravity must be quantized like all other forces. Yet the Oppenheim bet challenges this consensus with a 5,000-to-1 wager. Gravity might be the unique, special case that actually defines the universal background, rather than merely existing as another force within it.
What if the biggest challenge in physics is actually based on a fundamental category error? We are proposing an ontological erasure, the idea that gravity simply does not exist as a force. It's merely the ultimate correspondence between the macro world of planets and the micro world of particles. If gravity lacks a true ontology, if it's not truly there, then our decades-long search for a quantum theory of gravity becomes, quite literally, an attempt to quantize a ghost. We traditionally viewed space as an infinite void, but Project Gravitas reveals the crisis of infrastructure management. Gravity creates an unseen highway system, defining finite orbital lanes, critical exit ramps, and choke points, specifically at the Lagrange points. When we model this resource, from LEO to GEO, it functions exactly like high-value real estate that must be governed. We must now treat space as software-defined orbital infrastructure, not a boundless frontier.
The Kessler syndrome represents a crisis of neglect driven by collisional cascading. A single collision creates debris that causes an exponential increase in further impacts, initiating a self-sustaining reaction. If we cross this crucial point of no return, the orbital environment will become unusable, effectively locking humanity out of space. Remember, gravity enforces its own laws. We cannot negotiate with orbital mechanics.
We are dealing with a critical legal void when governing orbital space. Current treaties, like the Outer Space Treaty, prioritize peaceful intent, but fundamentally fail to account for orbital physics. Specifically in the geostationary belt, the ITU's first-come, first-served model has initiated a geopolitical land rush. Gravity simply doesn't care about our treaties, and this setup favors established powers, actively creating a dangerous Wild West environment where strategic slots are quickly being claimed.
We see a fascinating parallel in the oil industry with the COQA regulations, which strictly prohibit using API gravity as a standalone quality metric. Focusing solely on gravity is too powerful a proxy, oversimplifying complex realities and the true value of crude. This restriction creates an essential industrial silence, proving that sometimes controlling the metrics used to define quality is necessary for stable regulatory governance. To bring order to the final frontier, we need a complete governance stack. This structure is founded on the immutable laws of physics and gravity, which dictate orbital mechanics. This base supports the infrastructure layer, meaning active traffic management and immediate debris removal. The apex must be law, new norms and treaties established by a dedicated conference of the parties for space. We must move toward actively managing gravity as a critical, shared, and finite resource. It is time for Project Gravitas to break the silence surrounding our understanding of gravity. The historical inquisition, from Newton to modern quantum dogma, has left us vulnerable. As you can see by the orbital debris threat, we are ill-equipped for the space age. We must stop overlooking the obvious. Gravity is a resource and a controlled domain.
Instead of isolated objects drifting in a void, we embrace a truly relational reality. The glue holding our existence together isn't based on simple spatial distance, but on quantum entanglement. This exciting shift transforms our understanding of the cosmos, replacing the metaphor of force and coercion with a new emphasis on the deep fabric of connection.
Our legacy of separation began with the Newtonian dream, viewing the cosmos as a machine of isolated billiard ball particles. This materialistic worldview carried a severe psychological cost, profound human alienation, and total solitude, leaving us feeling isolated in an indifferent universe. When this lens was turned inward, it created a devastating social mirror. We adopted the narrative of a survival of the fittest, fostering brutal, cold competition instead of connection.
Physics fundamentally rests on two great pillars, general relativity and quantum mechanics, yet they fundamentally contradict how reality is built. General relativity assumes a smooth, continuous spacetime, while quantum mechanics describes a discrete, pixelated reality. This great divide collapses at extremes, like the center of a black hole, where current math fails completely. To finally bridge this gap, we must go beyond describing how gravity acts and successfully quantize the very fabric of space itself.
Loop quantum gravity radically changes how we view reality. It proposes that space isn't a passive background, but a physical substance built from discrete atoms of volume. If we zoom in to the Planck scale, the void reveals itself as a dense network of interwoven loops, known as spin networks. This confirms that space and time are truly granular, not continuous, meaning reality is structured more like a piece of sophisticated chainmail than a smooth, empty sheet.
We are now looking at entanglement as the fundamental glue for reality. The core question is, how do discrete chunks of space bind together into a single structure? The answer, rooted in the Joxelin proposal, is quantum entanglement. 2 points are adjacent not because of physical closeness, but because of this underlying quantum connection. This means distance is merely a derived effect, and the connection itself is the truly fundamental principle of the universe. Classical physics viewed reality as a rigid mosaic, fixed tiles of local facts in a preset pattern. Today, we favor the carpet model. Quantum gravity suggests reality is a woven fabric, where the fundamental threads are quantum entanglements. These threads are non-spatial, but when interwoven, they create the appearance and functionality of 3D space. This means space-time is not the foundation, it is an emergent result of these deeper, non-spatial relations within the system.
We must acknowledge the hard problem. How does the mind truly arise from matter? Emerging theories like panpsychism and Ork-Or suggest the reverse, that consciousness is a fundamental, universal field encoded directly into the universe's geometry. This echoes the concept of unus mundus, explored by Pauli and Jung. They posited a single underlying reality where mind and matter are unified, connecting not just through cause and effect, but through deep synchronicity.
We begin with the ancient concept of Indra's net, the universe as an infinite web where every jewel reflects the entire system. This deep metaphor mirrors the modern holographic principle, where the whole is contained within every part of reality. Remarkably, quantum physics is not discovering a new spirituality, it is mathematically validating this ancient intuition. The illusion of separation is dissolving, revealing that the physical world appears to us fundamentally as an undivided wholeness.
The core idea here, taken from St. Augustine, is that my weight is my love. He suggests gravity is the physical manifestation of our innate drive toward unity. Teilhard de Chardin developed this further, calling love metaphysical gravity, a cosmic energy pulling the universe toward higher consciousness. Ultimately, we realize these are connected. Gravity pulls matter together, love pulls consciousness together. They represent two octaves of the same fundamental, universal binding force.
We must stop treating God as a variable that only fills the gaps in our knowledge. Historically, when Newton explained gravity, God was often pushed aside. The correction is that God is not a force within the system, but the ground of being itself, the reason there is an equation at all. God is the author of the fundamental laws of entanglement, not merely a mechanic patching up the universe. The fascinating challenge of space exploration is how it forces us to adapt our deepest beliefs. For Muslims praying the Qibla, the physical direction constantly changes at 17,500 miles per hour, prompting a reliance on intent. Similarly, earthly sunset cycles that define the Sabbath vanish on Mars. The lesson is clear. Leaving Earth's gravity compels us to internalize our spiritual gravity, shifting our focus from geographical orientation to internal intention and connection. Teilhard viewed evolution not as a random process, but as a directional ascent toward greater complexity and consciousness. He described this convergence as psychic gravity, a powerful force akin to love, pulling all conscious beings toward a final singularity called the omega point. This ultimate state of the universe is not death and isolation, but a hyper-personal union, where the many achieve complete unity without sacrificing their individual identities. We are moving beyond the isolated narratives of the last century, reclaiming our place through the concept of entanglement glue. The new reality is this: you are not an accident in a cold void, but an essential node in an infinite connected web. Whether you describe this universal force as entanglement, gravity, or love, the takeaway is clear. Separation is the fundamental illusion. Unity and connection remain the deepest reality that binds us all. We can summarize these key insights into a powerful framework. Physics confirms space is a fabric woven by quantum entanglement, which shifts our worldview away from coercion toward true connection and relation. This deep unity suggests gravity is the physical shadow of love, driving wholeness. Ultimately, this points toward our shared destiny, evolution toward the omega point, where we achieve maximum complexity and consciousness. Visible architecture that governs our lives, universally treated as the ultimate, undeniable certainty, a fundamental law of the universe that admits no argument. But today, we are going to explore the gravity of doubt, deconstructing the evolution trap by revealing what happens when we look beneath that surface. We find a history riddled with silence, contradiction, and deep theoretical crisis waiting to be addressed. The public debate often weaponizes gravity as the ultimate settled fact. Evolution is just a theory, gravity is real. This rhetorical trap, rooted in the legacy of the Scopes trial, forces biology into a permanently controversial box. Our strategy is to overturn this false benchmark entirely. We must expose the complex history of gravity, demonstrating that it too has been fraught with just as much revision and doubt as any modern biological science. The crucial insight here is that certainty is often an architecture of silence, not total knowledge. Gravity appears stable because we've historically agreed not to discuss its true nature. As seen in this COQA specification, industrial bodies treat fundamentals purely as functional metrics, actively prohibiting deeper inquiries to maintain market stability. Similarly, science imposes methodological strictures, avoiding debates about ultimate cause. This regulatory and institutionalized silence is precisely what generates the stability we rely upon. It's crucial to understand the historical resistance to gravity. Early scientific giants, like Leibniz, vehemently rejected the idea of unexplained attraction because action at a distance looked like pure magic. They called it an occult quality. These critics demanded a mechanical pusher, like an ether or vortices, to move the planets. Think about that. The theory we accept as foundational physics today was once considered the fringe, supernatural concept of its era. We must fundamentally understand that gravity is not a force acting at a distance. The paradigm shifted in 1915 when Einstein proved that gravity is actually the curvature of space-time. An apple falls simply because the space it occupies is curved, not because Earth is pulling it. We still teach Newtonian models because they are highly useful, just as the caloric theory of heat once was. But we must remember that utility is not the same as ontological truth. The core problem in physics is the quantum catastrophe. Our two great theories, relativity and quantum mechanics, are fundamentally incompatible. Relativity works for the macro scale, but quantum mechanics describes the ultra-small. When we try to merge them, particularly inside a black hole singularity, our math immediately breaks down. Gravity resists quantization, resulting in nonsensical infinities, a theoretical silence where we lose all description of reality. While we treat gravity as a static fact, modern physics views it as an open question. Some theorists propose gravity is not fundamental, but an emergent entropic side effect, similar to heat. In this holographic concept, the three-dimensional pull we feel is actually a projection of information stored on a two-dimensional surface. We are still asking, what is it? Just like the 17th century philosophers, meaning the nature of gravity remains one of the greatest mysteries in the universe. The fine-tuning argument explores the incredible precision required for our universe to exist. The gravitational constant, for example, is calibrated to 1 part in 10 to the power of 60. As this gauge illustrates, if that dial were moved by a single notch, stars would either instantly collapse the cosmos or fail to form altogether. This razor-thin, life-permitting window suggests to many a profound inference. This precise setting points towards a chooser, echoing Newton's historical idea of a divine sustainer. Let's tackle the central counter-argument regarding universal design using Douglas Adams' famous puddle analogy. The puddle believes its perfectly shaped hole was intentionally created for it, failing to grasp that the water simply adapted to the existing environment. Similarly, the anthropic principle suggests that with infinite universes, the multiverse, one where life is possible is statistically guaranteed. What we perceive as incredible cosmic design is often just probability observed after the fact. We see the historical challenge of the God of the gaps. Newton invoked God for orbital stability, but Laplace later solved it mathematically, famously stating he had no need of that hypothesis. The theological trap is clear. Relying on scientific ignorance means the divine retreats as knowledge advances. Instead, we must shift our focus. True theological inquiry seeks the why or the purpose, not the how or the mechanics, ensuring we don't reduce the creator to a variable in a physics equation. We are exploring gravity beyond the physical, considering it as the weight of the soul, pondus meum amor meus. St. Augustine noted that the soul falls toward what it loves, just as a stone falls to its natural place. Parallel concepts exist in Eastern thought. Karma acts as an impersonal law of cause and effect, while prana is the intelligent life force that binds the cosmos. Across traditions, we find that gravity acts as a profound universal liturgy, consistently drawing all things toward fundamental unity. As humanity ventures into orbit, our earthbound rituals face profound challenges. How do you face Mecca when your trajectory is constantly dynamic? Or how do you mark the Sabbath sunset when you experience 16 sunrises every day? Religious scholars have provided adaptive solutions. Muslim astronauts use trajectory biasing or heartfelt intent, while Jewish scholars rely on Earth time as a fixed reference. The ultimate lesson is that humanity successfully adapts its deepest truths to function, even in uncertain new physical realities. We need to escape the trap of judging theories by finality. The verdict is clear. The claim that evolution is just a theory but gravity is a fact is false. Gravity is also a theory, one that has evolved dramatically from an occult force to a quantum mystery. True scientific models are ladders. They always have unanswered questions at the top. We must reframe fact to mean reliability, not finality. Newtonian physics is technically wrong, but it still lands planes, just as evolution explains life. Ultimately, whether we view gravity as the curvature of space-time or the deep constant of creation, it remains the primary thread connecting the physical world to the metaphysical. We must learn to embrace the silence. The gaps in our current knowledge, the singularities, the dark matter, are not voids to be feared, but essential spaces. These are precisely where the crucial, ongoing conversation between science and faith continues to unfold. We often consider gravity a simple, fixed constant defined by Newton's elegant mechanics, illustrated here on the left. Yet, orbital mechanics exist at the intersection of pure physics and extreme state governance. The highly redacted documents on the right hint at the true challenge. Regulations like the Orbital Liability Act and Unified Field Theory are strictly confidential. This suggests gravity is in fact the most legislated and perhaps least understood force in the universe, an architecture of silence we must explore. Newton's work fundamentally changed scientific inquiry by imposing a mandate of silence regarding causal explanations. His famous statement, hypotheses non fingo, became a strict methodological rule for his followers. Yet this refusal wasn't just methodological. His core concept of gravity, a force penetrating nearly empty space, was profoundly non-mechanical. We see the internal conflict clearly in his private admission that action at a distance is an absurdity. He knew his physical mechanism was highly problematic, but he insisted on describing how things worked, not why. Let's examine the strange case of the regulatory gag order. A 2022 ruling mandates that we never discuss crude oil gravity specifications in isolation. It's now classified. This regulation forces us to confront the virtue of gravity itself, which means silence and seriousness. When we speak excessively or simplify these complex metrics, we risk losing credibility. The clear lesson is that maintaining the seriousness of our regulatory compliance means maintaining our corporate gravity. We must examine the heretics. On the left, Lesage's 18th century mechanical model suggested that gravity isn't attraction, but is caused by corpuscles pushing objects together, creating a gravitational shadow. Fast forward to today, Exhibit B presents the electrogravic hypothesis. This modern approach reframes gravity as a residual electromagnetic force, showing how fundamental charge interactions, scaled by c², may actually account for large-scale mass distribution and attraction. We must confront the case of ontological denial. Does gravity even exist in the way we traditionally define it? Our current framework treats gravity not as a fundamental force, but merely as a correspondence within the epistemologically different worlds theory. This fundamental challenge has led to some dramatic philosophical wagers in the physics community. Unfortunately, Professor Oppenheim's 5,000-to-1 bet against the quantization of gravity, with the stakes set at 5,000 bags of potato chips, was officially rejected.
The real pivot is transforming the cosmos from an unknown frontier into a robust, software-defined utility. As this system architecture shows, LEO and GEO are becoming rings of critical infrastructure. We recognize that while we design the network, gravity remains the primary architect, dictating where we build and who controls those valuable orbital slots. This Phase 2, governance, is about ensuring strategic access and long-term geopolitical value. We must stop viewing space as an endless frontier and recognize it as contested real estate defined by gravity. These critical Lagrange points are strategic orbital choke points. They allow assets to be maintained with minimal energy,
turning stable locations like L2 into essential cosmic toll gates. Just as geography dictates terrestrial power, gravity now dictates the flow of movement, access, and scarcity in the solar system. Our legal foundation for space governance is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, yet it contains a significant loophole. While Article 2 strictly forbids national appropriation, meaning no one can claim ownership of the Moon or Mars, it doesn't explicitly restrict commercial or military use. This ambiguity between use versus permanent appropriation is the legal gray zone currently fueling the high-stakes race for effective control of celestial bodies.
We are witnessing the acceleration of the Kessler syndrome, a physical suicide pact for the digital age. The visualization shows how densely populated low Earth orbit is now, nearing a critical inflection point. Our data confirms a self-sustaining cascade. Collisions create more debris, which causes more collisions. Notice how the orbital debris density is spiking exponentially on the graph. The space junk apocalypse is no longer. We are rapidly approaching the moment when access to space becomes functionally impossible.
The framework for liability from the skies is surprisingly rooted in history. We start with the 1930s precedent of aerial trespass, which established strict liability for low-altitude, ultra-hazardous activities like crop dusting. We now directly apply these same foundational principles to orbital operations. Given the exponential increase in space debris, assigning liability for damage caused by re-entering objects is crucial. The key takeaway: legal principles truly transcend opajing, proving that space is no longer a lawless void.
Historically, the physics of freefall was burdened by complex misconceptions. Early hypotheses, like the 19th century Mercury paradox, focused on the dramatic physiological impact, the idea that rapid descent caused measurable internal fluid shifts. While experiments like the Kuanon box sought empirical evidence, all these efforts often complicated the elegant simplicity of gravitational acceleration. We must strip away these historical confusions to grasp the fundamental equivalence of mass. We need to understand how certainty is weaponized. Look back at the 1925 Scopes trial. Opponents of evolution often use the argument, if evolution were as established as the theory of gravity. But here's the irony. While the effects of gravity were certain, its actual mechanism was completely unknown in 1925. This historical example reveals how rhetorical certainty is deployed against scientific progress, exploiting temporary unknowns in emerging fields as definitive proof of a flaw.
Let's examine the true impact of cultural disorientation. When the gravitational anomaly was detected, the operational data immediately corrupted, leaving us functionally blind. We weren't dealing with a solvable equation anymore. We were facing the visceral terror of the void itself. The critical human response was universal, a cascade into total panic and deep isolation, which quickly became our primary threat. We are experiencing a fundamental collision between fixed reality and flexible regulation. On one side are the immutable constraints of physics, Newton's laws, and on the other, the evolving complexities of political law. The digital economy is the breaking point, acting as the nexus for this tension. This conflict manifests in critical problems, including the ambiguity of digital ownership and the rise of physical pollution from data infrastructure. We must navigate this inevitable friction, where abstract legal concepts meet concrete physical reality. As we conclude the initial deep dive into file H-012/A, the implications are stark. The intelligence gathered points towards a single, profound truth about global stability, that silence is the ultimate destiny of gravity. This is not the end, merely the end of the beginning. Our initial findings are highly sensitive, and we must recognize the scope of this phenomenon is still immense. The investigation continues, and our next steps are critical. Gravity is the anchor of our reality, appearing self-evident and omnipresent. Yet this project, the architecture of gravitational silence, argues that the concept is often enforced by a web of constraints. This is a comprehensive study of prohibitions, mapping strict industrial regulations and deep theoretical gag orders that frequently forbid us from discussing gravity's fundamental nature, its isolation, or its underlying cause. We are examining how high-complexity systems operate by managing the visible and the unspoken. This principle, that isolating a single variable is often punished, manifests everywhere. In the industrial sphere, market stability relies on prohibiting the isolation of gravity. Historically, Newton's great scientific progress was purchased by his famous refusal to speak of cause. And finally, in the theoretical sphere, modern dogma still enforces that gravity must be quantized, effectively silencing compelling classical alternatives. The industry maintains a strict regulatory silence on API gravity. You cannot discuss it in isolation. Gravity determines value, but isolating it from sulfur and viscosity completely distorts the refining reality, which is why collective specifications are enforced. The standard range for domestic sweet crude is a tight 38 to 42 API. We manage lighter streams, those 44 and above, by integrating them into the overall collective, rather than isolating gravity as the sole operational culprit.
We're looking at gravity as a moral discipline. Drawing from Lassallean ethics, gravity isn't a physical force, but a virtue regulating the exterior self. It's defined specifically as the discipline of silence, the ability to avoid speaking when one shouldn't. This principle is vital for maintaining institutional stability. Just as the oil market requires collective standards to maintain equilibrium, any organization needs this restraint, or gravity, to achieve good order. Think of it not as a force of attraction, but as a critical force of self-restraint.
Newton revolutionized physics not just with calculations, but through his strategic silence, captured in the motto, hypotheses non fingo. He described attraction mathematically, while explicitly forbidding any discussion of its underlying mechanism. By avoiding sterile metaphysical debates, he created a framework that, though based on an absurdity, action at a distance, required the world to accept his proven results without question. This brilliant move halted ontological inquiry for over 2 centuries.
We are seeing a powerful rhetorical tactic where gravity, considered a monolithic fact, is benchmarked against evolution, which is often dismissed as just a theory. This framing deliberately ignores the historical uncertainty and dispute that existed even around established truths like gravity itself. The underlying function is to police the boundaries of legitimate science, setting an impossibly high standard of certainty that ultimately serves to delegitimize serious biological inquiry.
Our current quantum orthodoxy insists that gravity must be quantized to fit the standard model, treating it as simply another field. This creates a severe conflict, pitting smooth general relativity against probabilistic quantum mechanics. Critically, to suggest gravity might remain classical is seen as heresy. But consider the counterpoint. Gravity is special. It defines the universal background geometry, and quantizing it effectively destroys the entire stage where all physics is supposed to occur. Physicist Jonathan Oppenheim has placed a radical 5,000 to 1 bet against the standard model, challenging the very quantization of gravity. The paradox is that classical gravity knows too much, breaking quantum uncertainty. Oppenheim's solution is that nature must be fundamentally stochastic. A kind of inherent jiggle in the gravitational field prevents precise measurement. If this non-orthodox view prevails, we must accept fundamental, irreducible unpredictability at the core of physics. Our latest work in quantum gravity suggests that space-time itself is not fundamental, but truly emergent. This presents a serious crisis for established philosophies, which rely on the physical universe being a fixed spatio-temporal mosaic of facts. If that fundamental stage dissolves, the mosaic shatters completely. The implication is profound. We are confronting a reality with laws that exist entirely beyond space-time, fundamentally rendering our traditional concepts of how the laws of nature govern evolution meaningless.
Newton's lack of mechanism for gravity left a theoretical vacuum, which the electrical hypothesis attempts to fill. This proposal posits that gravity is actually a secondary electrical force resulting from the interaction of fundamental charges. The calculation attempts to derive the gravitational constant, g, using the speed of light squared and the ratio of electrical charges. While this theory operates outside the current orthodoxy, it highlights our persistent human need for a mechanical, local explanation, rejecting the idea of universal action at a distance.
Our current practice is to regulate gravity to maintain order, a principle applied everywhere from the refinery floor to the event horizon. But true progress demands we shatter this centuries-old Newtonian gag order. The emerging crisis of space-time compels us to finally define what gravity is, moving beyond simplifying hypotheses. We must adopt a new language of reality that exists
The title, The Architecture of Gravitational Silence, frames our approach. We are drawing a direct link between the systemic complexity of physical industry, visible in this detailed piping diagram, and the fundamental complexity of space-time itself. Whether managing industrial regulations or analyzing event horizons, the underlying principle holds. Truly isolated variables are prohibited. Every element connects structurally, generating systemic distortions we must map. This moves our analysis beyond simple parts and into the realm of integrated systems. Our executive thesis is simple. Isolation is distortion. We see this precedent clearly in the oil industry, where isolating density without chemical context causes market hallucinations. General relativity suffers the same conceptual error by isolating gravity, creating singularities where the model forecasts its own demise. The core insight is that the death of gravity is a linguistic limit, not a physical reality. We must recontextualize these forces through new paradigms to restore continuity. Proving the breakdown of the universe is merely a breakdown of our current syntax. The Crude Oil Quality Association established a clear rule. Crude specifications must always be collective. Discussing API gravity in isolation is forbidden because gravity alone, void of context like naphtha content, is simply a market hallucination. A stream can meet the gravity target and still fail quality tests. This regulatory silence on isolated variables is intentional. It maintains market stability and prevents producers from pushing creeping specs into the system, ensuring reliable trade for everyone involved. Newton's historical method was defined by his methodological silence, famously stating, "Hypotheses non fingo, I frame no hypotheses." He successfully detailed how gravity moves objects mathematically, but strictly refused to speculate on its underlying cause. While this silence allowed mathematical physics to progress, it established a two-century tradition where the deeper ontological nature of gravity was deemed sterile. This exclusion from proper investigation created a profound blind spot in scientific inquiry that persisted well into the 20th century. The core challenge is the compliance failure of general relativity itself. GR's mathematical model breaks down entirely at the singularity, where infinite density creates a literal divide by zero error. This failure directly generates the Hawking manipulates the core principles of quantum mechanics. We must reframe this conflict not as the world physically breaking, but as the language of physics failing, because it lacks the necessary quantum context to accurately describe these extreme conditions.
We are grappling with a profound conflict between the discrete, quantized dogma and classical integrity. While the consensus insists gravity must be quantized to fit the standard model, theorists like Oppenheim counter that gravity is inherently special and continuous. Intriguingly, some frameworks dismiss the graviton entirely, arguing gravitation isn't even a force. The key takeaway is that the singularity is not a failure of physics, but a vital invitation to expand our conceptual vocabulary. Standard general relativity predicts an infinite silence at the black hole center, creating the mathematical problem of the singularity. the Bardeen-Hayward solution offers a fix, introducing a nonlinear magnetic monopole. This crucial adjustment makes the geometry geodesically complete, forcing the mass function to vanish as it approaches r equals 0. Ultimately, the infinite silence is replaced by a physical, finite, high-density core, a much more complete and stable model.
The core problem is evident in the galactic rotation curve. Newtonian physics predicts a significant velocity drop-off, yet observed reality is flat. Standard general relativity handles this by inventing dark matter, a ghost particle, to force a fit. Instead, our modified gravity approach, MOG and EGB, provides the necessary regulatory update to the space-time specification. By incorporating new scalar and vector fields into the theory, we generate a fit that precisely matches the observation, eliminating the need for those phantom particles altogether. The current orthodoxy demands the quantization of gravity, but theories like string theory give us a chaotic landscape of 10 to the power of 500 possible universes, effectively failing to describe the one we inhabit. The determination we need lies in the resistance, embracing the forbidden middle ground where space itself is emergent. Imagine space arising from non-spatiotemporal structures, similar to how market value spontaneously emerges from countless individual trades.
Institutional gravity is the ethical force that ensures good order within our community. We can think of it as the sum of modesty and politeness. Much like physical gravity binds the cosmos, this institutional force binds us together, requiring a collective standard of behavior. Its primary function is regulating the isolation of the ego, emphasizing that we must utilize appropriate conduct, including the discipline of silence when necessary. Let's look at the fragmentation model. Trade gravity still connects the major economic mass centers, the US, EU, and China. But the global order is entering a gravity silence crisis. Institutions are silent on massive frictions, creating geopolitical singularities like Gaza and Myanmar. When economic power isolates itself from humanitarian reality, the result is zones of impunity, signaling a profound divorce in the global system.
The core pedagogical error is suggesting astronauts float due to zero gravity. In reality, they are in constant free fall because of gravity. We know the gravitational field is still present because a mercury drop in a falling environment oscillates dramatically, proving constant interaction. To fix this common misconception, we must emphasize the relativity of the gravitational field, explaining how the perception of gravity depends entirely on the observer's frame of reference.
To truly synthesize these diverse domains, observe how the isolation of the primary variable, whether API gravity, space-time geometry, or the individual ego, always triggers a critical breakdown, such as market hallucination or singularity. The solution, the regular fix, consistently involves a collective specification, a contextual factor that introduces stability. This translates to market stability, geodesic completeness, and institutional order, proving that regularity is achieved by prohibiting the isolation of the initial variable.
We are breaking the silence by shifting our approach from singular, broken systems toward a regular, contextual framework. We must resist framing problems like the death of gravity without immediately offering the solutions that replace them. The breakdown we experience at the singularity is actually an invitation to expand our knowledge and vocabulary. Remember, the world isn't hostile, it's just shrouded. We must look closer and listen harder to truly understand.